We're going to jump into today's pod. We're going to give our outlook on the 21-22 Charlotte Hornets team. We're going to break this episode kind of like into two different sections. The first half of the podcast, we're just going to be talking about specific individual players. In the second half of the podcast, we're going to be looking at the team as a whole. And we've got different kind of categories and topics that we're going to run down here. So, Lee, I'm actually going to pass it to you first. When it comes to the newcomers on this team, whether it's free agents or rookies, which specific one are you most excited about for the upcoming season?
All right, so I actually thought pretty hard about this one, and I think my answer could potentially be a little surprising because I've been, I guess I think I've been rationally critical of this player, but I'm also like kind of secretly really pumped too, and have really talked myself into him, and that's James Bouknight. Um, I just think with kind of his ability as kind of like I wouldn't necessarily say elite athlete, but like kind of an elite functional basketball athlete with the way he is able to slash in the lane and obviously I've talked about how I don't love the fact that he over dribbles at time and I'm a little worried about the shooting and all this, but the point I'm trying to make here is essentially that in the summer league he was obviously asked to do way too much on ball creation. He's looked like orders of magnitude more comfortable, in my opinion, in the preseason as kind of more of a secondary or tertiary playmaking option, particularly like in transition and attacking closeouts. And then you also factor in that I think his role is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Malik Monk is not on this roster anymore. We kind of depended on him as a change of pace, like shake things up when he comes into the game. There were multiple games last year where Monk and Bridges entering the game in the second unit completely changed like the vibe of a certain contest. We talked a lot about how the starters got off to slow starts last year. So essentially what I'm saying is I think the role that Bouknight could potentially fill if he plays well would be incredibly important for this team. So although I've been cautiously optimistic, I also think there's a huge chance and opportunity for him.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that backup unit is desperately needing a backup shooting guard position. And to your point, when he did play with more of the starters or players that are, NBA quality, instead of playing in the summer league where it's sloppy play and you're playing with lesser talent, it's kind of hard to judge a player because he's going to be asked to do things that he's not normally going to do on the NBA level. So yeah, he is trying to find his kind of comfort zone there. And I think he's a player that if he does play well in his rookie season, I think that's going to bode well for the Charlotte Hornets and their success. I guess the one thing is like, yeah, if he's playing with players that he is going to be that secondary or tertiary player, I think he's going to do fine and he's going to fit right in. But like, Borrego doesn't do wholesale changes by any means. But if he is playing with mostly second unit players, will you see him pound the rock a little bit too much and try to do too much? That's I guess the one worry that I have of him. But yeah, I'm excited to see him come. He's not my answer by any means, but that's a good choice there.
Yeah, I mean, quickly on Bouknight, I think he looked, scoring his scoring instincts. We got to see those in the preseason. The assist numbers didn't look great, but I think mostly the the players we got to see on the court in preseason. I mean, it was easily one of the worst offenses in the NBA in that small 4-game sample. So yeah, I mostly liked what I saw from Bouknight. He's comfortable in the pick and roll. He's already got the get the guy on his hip. Keep the dribble alive in the middle of the floor. It's just making the play from there is really where he's got to polish it up. The dribble looks still really high to me. I mean, he's got to clean that up, lower center of gravity when he's in traffic. And then the shooting. I mean, we've talked about that, but a poor shooting preseason pretty much across the board for the Hornets, really. But Bouknight, I think he was like 20% from behind the arc. I mean, his shot just continues to be very inconsistent, whether it's on the catch or off the dribble. I think he's more comfortable taking it off the dribble. Right now, at least that's what I see on the eye test. But look, he's going to have to play a role for this team this year. He's going to have to come off the bench and score the basketball. And in terms of scoring, again, we saw that in the preseason. So I'd say for a rookie, good early signs. My answer to this question, Richie, is Kelly Ubrae. So I'm interested to see what you say. I just think like said this enough now. He gives the team more than anything else just a versatile defensive wing that I think, can play 2 through 4 basically. The Hornets aren't going to be able to go big a lot, but they can start. I'm picturing lineups later in the season where if he has a hot hand, if he's helping them on both ends, you finish with PJ at 5 and you can put Ubrae at 4, right? And then obviously his natural position will be the 3, but he just gives this team something they didn't have last season defensively, an athletic wing who's a real ball stopper to me with his length, like more so than a guy like Miles Bridges, who took a big step last year. But Ubrae is just a different kind of like pterodactyl defender when he's locked in with his wingspan and his length. So I'm really excited to see him. We really didn't see any of him hardly in preseason.
Yeah.
So, it's still kind of a mystery for Hornets fans. Much like I was just saying about book night. I mean, for Ubrae, it's the catch and shoot numbers. They've been almost average, maybe slightly below league average. I think at his best in his NBA career last season in Golden State, it was really not good at all. I don't think he was a good fit in that read and react system. I think he's going to be a fine fit in Charlotte. It's not quite as like I said, read and react is a system he was in last year. I think he's going to be a good transition fit with Miles Bridges and LaMelo Ball. So his athleticism, I think, is just so vital to this team, and is going to allow them to play up tempo on really both ends, which is the way this team wants to play. So I think it's a real tool for Borrego, and I'll be interested to see, if he's just a guy that comes off the bench all year, assuming that the Hornets are healthy. Or, does he really overperform and earn his way a starting spot at some point? Obviously, he'll play in the starting lineup at some point because of injuries, but I'm really excited about Ubrae. I think he can help Charlotte. I think he's a good fit.
Yeah, I'm kind of lukewarm on him. I do like the fit. Like I think that the defense is desperately needed. The athleticism, the ranginess, the ability to switch and have those versatile players out there, because Hornets clearly need help on that side of the court. Offensively, that's where I'm a little bit more like less confident that he's going to be that big of an impact there. His 3-point shooting has never really been a thing. And like you said, he's kind of been below average there. I think what we saw in preseason was, and Lee, I think you and I even talked about it after the game 1 of preseason, like we'd like to see him cut a little bit more often. I get that it was just 1 game into preseason, but it felt like he had the ball in his hands a little bit too often. But yeah, I think the transition game is going to affect him perfectly, and I think that's where he can fit in a little bit better than, say, some of his other stops in his previous career. So yeah, I like Ubrae as well, but I'm just a little bit more lukewarm on him. Lee, I'll let you get to Kelly Ubrae if you have any thoughts on him. But the player that I want to bring up, it's funny, we all have 3 different answers on terms of who we're most excited about. Mine's Ishsmith. I just like the hometown connection. I like the play style fit. The pace, the playmaking. Obviously he's going to be filling in for Devontae Graham. Their games differ very, very much in terms of like what they're going to provide for the team. And I think with Devontae Graham, yes, he has the 3-point shooting and the gravity there, but he didn't put any pressure in the paint or at the rim, really. So Ishsmith, I think, can do that for this team, and that's going to open up a lot for this team because when Devontae was there, if he was making his threes, that's great. But the fact that he had a hesitancy to get inside the paint, it kind of hampered the offense at times, and it didn't collapse the defense. So,
yeah, no, I think you guys laid out the cases for Ubrae and Smith pretty well. Those were the other 2 guys I had written down just to see who you guys would take, and then talk about. I think the Ubrae point's really interesting because we've kind of just got this like gaggle of like versatile, lengthy wings now, kind of depending on how you characterize PJ Washington. But whether you include him or not, Ubrae, Hayward, Bridges, McDaniels are kind of just this, like I said, just this group of long rangey skilled wings that gives Borrego a lot of flexibility with lineup configuration. And I'm hopeful that translates particularly into a little bit more defensive efficiency. And then, yeah, for Ish, I mean, I think I've said it multiple times on this podcast. Like I love Ishsmith. He's obviously limited, and I do worry a little bit about a book night Ishsmith kind of backup backcourt and some of the limitations there that we've like already talked about with both players, seeing exactly how that fits, particularly offensively. So it is not without concerns, but Ishsmith is just like a professional, serviceable backup point guard. I think an upgrade that the Hornets have kind of desperately needed as they've searched for that, kind of third option ball handler for the past couple of years.
One quick thing on Ubrae I didn't mention, it might be the most important thing I think he brings to the Hornets scheme is just allowing them to play more traditional. They're going to switch. Like, this isn't going to be a man-to-man fight through screens defense. I think if you've watched this team, you understand that. But it's not going to be as junky is what I'm trying to get at, where it's like a true matchup zone, something you'd see in college, or those 2-3s after timeout. I think Borrego's still going to do a lot of zone after timeout. But Ubrae just will allow this team to just switch, just switch ball screens, all that, without having to junk it up so much. Ishsmith, I think he's going to be a very steady backup point guard. He's not going to beat you. Obviously, you guys have touched on his limitations. I think one of the things we really learned in the preseason, I should have known this beforehand, but it was just so damn obvious in preseason, is this bench has got no shooting at all. And I think this will be a problem with Ishsmith.
Right.
Borrego's going to have to mix and match because, LaMelo can get into the lane with his length and see over the top and spray it out to shooters. Smith can just get in there with his speed, right, with his first step. Is he going to have anyone to throw it out to that can make a shot? I mean, poor Jalen McDaniels look awful in preseason. He's kind of the corner sniper hope, I think, maybe deep second unit guy. I mean, you look down the rest of the bench unit and you're just like, where is the shooting? So that's the one thing that really concerns me with Ish and the half court and how that's going to function. I think they're going to really have to push the pace, that second group.
And just real quickly here, which newcomer do we think is going to make the biggest impact? So it doesn't necessarily have to be the same answer that you just gave. And this is another one I thought about, Lee. I kept going back and forth. And there's a part of me that wants to say Mason Plumlee, because you and I talked about him being a guy that was a little bit underwhelming in preseason, but also needing that time to kind of fit in with the roster and stuff like that. And last season, the center position was definitely a position of need. I still think it's kind of thin as it is, even though there's a lot of bodies there. I think when it's all said and done, he's a guy that will kind of replicate a lot of what Zeller did with his playmaking, his rebounding, his screen setting, and he's more dependable than Cody is. So do you guys have a different answer for that? Like, which player do you think is going to be the biggest impact player of all the newcomers?
Well, Plumlee. Oh, sorry. I think Plumlee could be the answer here, Richie, mostly because, I brought this up with Nate Duncan on his pod, but I'm like, if you just take the Plumlee minutes, or excuse me, you take the Bismack minutes from last year and you just give them to Plumlee, and then you put a qualifier into those minutes saying Plumlee's just going to be available for like 75-ish games because he has been traditionally. I think that makes such a huge difference for this team because you're not going to be a negative 10 net rating in those minutes that you're giving to Plumlee, as we were with Biz, who played almost 1,400 minutes last season. So that's whether Plumlee's like average bad or just slightly below average bad, he's still not going to be as bad as Biz in those minutes. So he might be the most important newcomer just from that perspective. I still think the answer here is Ubrae. I just think he changes the way this team can play defensively so much that he's the most important guy.
Yeah, I would actually say Ubrae too. Although the argument I think for Plumlee is super rational because he's obviously probably going to start. From at least from what we've seen from Borrego in the preseason, and as you guys just intelligently laid out, like the center minutes last year. We've said it a million times. Like Zeller basically kind of treaded water. Bismack was just. We hemorrhaged points when Bismack played. And then the PJ at the 5 lineups were obviously super productive. So, but I agree. I think I would slightly lean towards Ubrae too, for all the reasons we've kind of already talked about.
And one last thing on Plumlee, Richie, like if you watch the Memphis game in general, and I think the league is going to start to trend back in this direction. There's more bruising center teams now. And this is just the reason that the Hornets have they've got to get real center minutes. Those PJ minutes are productive on paper, but there are just nights where, we got out-rebounded by Memphis by like 30.
Mhm.
right? And it was just, I mean, over and over and over again, Steven Adams just keep it. So at some point, the Hornets have got to reel back on that strategy. I know the numbers bear it out that it looks good, but at some point, we got to get real center minutes. So again, to your Plumlee point, maybe he is the most important.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, they're just thin there, and they're going to play small. So I think that's something that they're probably not going to have a lot of success in when it comes to rebounding. But